Hi, welcome to this series, the Jeff the Killer saga. Yeah, so I'm covering the Jeff the Killer canon, and by covering I mean reviewing. And if you don't really know much about it, then the best way I can really describe this canon is more like a comic book series written by a bunch of incoherent squirrels. So, in this episode, I'll be covering the stories that introduce the main characters, Lou, Jane, and Jeff. Mainly because if you don't really understand these stories, nothing else makes sense, and if we want to delve into the madness that is the canon, it's necessary to cover the foundation. Also, it's just really fun to talk about really old creepypastas for some reason. So next episode I'll cover some of the sequels to these stories that I think to be very notable, and without further ado, let's go! Welcome to this thing! Alright, so first off, I think I should probably explain what a creepypasta is. A creepypasta is an internet horror story. They used to be exclusively written down, but nowadays we have creepypasta games like Note, Players Online, or video series like Marble Hornets. Hell, even my friend Frode is making one on Lego Island. Link in the description, by the way. Yeah, that should show you how expansive the word creepypasta can be. So if you can think about it, there's probably a creepypasta about it. So like Ed, Ed and Eddie, creepypasta about it. Sonic, multiple. Like, you get the point. So you're probably wondering what the hell a Jeff the Killer is. So, back in the early 2010s, there was the titular Jeff the Killer story, which spawned tons and tons of spin-offs and sequels, and a bunch of reboots. People loved this little shit until they all grew up and started hating Jeff, and then a lot of videos came out, and now it's just sort of like he's the awkward elephant in the room whenever someone reminisces about old creepypastas. It's kind of like how people started hating Twilight after a while, but unlike Twilight, Jeff the Killer has well, see, at least Twilight is a story about characters. Jeff the Killer, isn't? So, of course, I had to talk about it. Also, a quick side note, but a very important one. Please don't attack or harass any authors or fans of these creepypastas. Just because I don't like them, it shouldn't be justification to persecute them. So, you know, people don't get paid to write creepypastas. A lot of them are, well, passion projects. People feel like they have a good idea for a horror story and they write it down. And, well, at the end of the day, this is my opinion, and I don't want someone to weaponize my opinion, if that makes any sense. So let's get into it. Part 1, Jeff the Killer. So the story goes like this. We get introduced to Jeff and his family, and the only named character in his entire family is his brother, Lou. People don't know how to really pronounce his name, but I'm gonna call him Lou, like Liu Kang. So Jeff and Lou get bullied at a bus stop by kids named Randy, Keith, and Troy, which basically generic bullies. So become familiar with these names because they come up again and again and again. So naturally, Jeff activates fucking Ultra Instinct and beats the shit out of the 3 bullies. He's 13. I'm just gonna let that one sit for a second. Anyway, the police show up and Lou, you know, as the good homie he is, he's like, "Don't worry, Jeff, I'll take the blame for the police." And then Jeff, like, is angry and depressed about it. But his parents are like, "You know what, it's okay. We're gonna take you to this birthday party and everything will be alright." And then it isn't, because Randy, Keith, and Troy show up with guns. And like, first off, who sold these 3 guns? Whatever. And instead of shooting Jeff, they decide to fight him one-on-one again, which went so well for them the first time. So Jeff beats them all up because he's the coolest, most badass, most hip kid ever. But this time they throw bleach on him and set him on fire because, as everyone knows, bleach is flammable. And he wakes up in the middle of a hospital. But instead of resembling a burnt pepperoni pizza, he looks at his face and he's like, "Oh my god, I'm a anime now. He has white skin with jet black hair, and I don't think I need to explain why this is dumb. And now for some reason he's insane, and he cuts his face so he could look like the Joker and burns off his eyelid. Once again, I'm not even gonna feel like I need to explain why the whole burning the eyelids thing wouldn't work, but whatever. So his mom finds him, and instead of taking her clearly insane son to the hospital, she just decides to tell her husband to, and I quote, get the gun. Okay. Anyway, he kills his parents even though they have a shotgun and he has like a fucking kitchen knife. And then he kills Lou. The end. And there was never a Jeff the Killer story ever again. Okay, so now that I've caught you all up, I think we can all agree that this is kind of bad. So, like, the first main problem with the story is that, well, Jeff is the main character. And in horror fiction, having your main character be the villain, I mean, it's a ballsy move because you have to make them both relatable as the main character and threatening as a villain. And Jeff is neither. He doesn't really have any personality traits. I mean, he's OP and he's sad for a little bit and then he goes crazy. And then the story completely changes from, you know, a POV to another creepypasta story where there's this monster who kills people. Jeff isn't really a character, he's kind of a narrative tool. He's both a POV character and the monster of the week, if that makes sense. It's weird, right? It's sort of weird to analyze, but he exists mainly to create conflict in the stories he's in. And if you want to write a story like that, well, I mean, Jeff can't really be the main character. I mean, a really easy way to fix this story would you just make the POV character Lou. Have Lou slowly see his beloved brother turn insane, and before he could do anything about it, Jeff kills him. Like, I don't know, that'd be a scary story. Call it My Brother Jeffrey. There. You don't really need to alter that much. Just get rid of the bullies, make the story a little bit longer, and, well, give Jeff some character traits. There are ways to fix this. I'm not going to pretend like this is the worst thing ever. But as we're about to see, this kind of writing sort of becomes the norm. So, part 2, Homicidal Lou. So this story is both a spin-off and a sequel, and it's not good. I'm sorry. It's horrid. So the story's about the concept of Lou surviving Jeff's attack. Now, a lot of people interpret this as Lou wanting revenge for the murder of his family, and that would be really cool. But that's not what happens in the story. No, Lou wants to protect Jeff. Lou, why would you want that? Jeff killed your family. Oh, because the voices told him to. Yeah, so just like Jeff the Killer, he also becomes insane for no reason. And he pretty much just starts to act like Jeff at this point. He kills someone for no reason. He might as well just be a palette swap of Jeff at this point. So Lou's basically a ripoff of Jeff, who wasn't even really a character in the first place. It's like if you microwaved fish in like The Office, right? And everyone hates the smell, but instead of getting rid of it, you just took the smell of the fish and microwaved it again. That's what this is. Also, this is where like a lot of the cliches we'll see in the whole Jeff the Killer canon start coming up. So first we have going insane for no reason, obviously. Comparing Jeff to a monster. These include wild dogs, cats, and of course demons. Describing what characters look like in excruciating detail. And last but not least, a killer who uses knives. Which is another thing that like kinda confuses me. Why a knife of all things? Why not use anything else like a gun, a bow and arrow, a harpoon, or several different weapons? I mean, it's just sort of weird that like this little kid is coming at you with like a dinky little knife, especially when these stories take place in America. I mean, I don't think it's going to pan out for you well, Jeff. Like, you know, why not shake it up a little? But anyway, that's basically Homicidal Lou. I'd say it's probably the worst story yet, which is quite an accomplishment, but it's just a ripoff of the original, so it kinda has to be worse, if that makes sense. So yeah, next story, part 3. 3, Jane the Killer. Sadly, this is the best story of the bunch because it's actually a story. So this story tries its hardest to like shoehorn itself into the events of the first story, and while that isn't the worst idea ever, it makes it feel like everyone important comes from this shitty little town. So we get introduced to Jane, and she is yet another self-insert character in this universe, but unlike Jeff, she's given traits. She's not a hollow shell like either of these I don't know, the Mario Brothers of insane killers. She has traits. She's a character. Also, this is the first story that refers to the Jeff and Lou with the last name Woods, which was, if I'm correct, it was a fan name that just became canon after a while, so yeah, it's really dumb, but who cares? But my problems come with the fact that she gets bullied by Randy, Keith, and Troy. She also gets to experience a birthday party, and she watches Jeff in the hospital room, even though they've only had one conversation. It's maddening. Why does she have to be in every situation from the original story? She is also yet another character in this universe who has to think about Jeff constantly. It's dumb. Why does everyone in this universe have to center their lives around this one guy? Anyway, she starts to dream about Jeff and her conquering the universe as husband and wife. And then Jeff shows up, kills her parents, and she's like, yes, now we can be free. And Jeff responds with his best line ever. I'm sorry. This was the only time I actually felt like he was anything more than like an edgy little bitch. He responds with, sorry, who are you? Which, it's just perfect. I fucking love it. It's amazing. Anyway, she burns to death. The police find her body, and she apparently died of childbirth. And now she pledges her revenge to Jeff. Did she give birth to herself? Is she a ghost? But, like, she's a human in other stories, but this kind of implies that she's a ghost, but she's not. What the hell? It's dumb. It's really dumb. Jokes aside, I like how there's tragedy to Jane's character. I like how she builds up this relationship with Jeff even though she doesn't have one. And then when Jeff, pulls the carpet out from under her feet, she feels like she must be different from Jeff, but really they're the same. They're both crazy murderers who justify their killings on, well, everything but themselves. Honestly, I feel like Jane is a better Jeff than either of the Woods brothers, which kinda says a lot. And even though she does go insane by the end of the story, it doesn't really feel forced. It doesn't feel forced because it's shown very clearly that she has like emotional attachment issues. She tries to talk to Jeff, and even though they've had one conversation, she assumes that they're friends, which a lot of people attribute to bad writing, but I genuinely thought it was good characterization. If she's a crazy murderer, of course she's gonna think that. Like, she's crazy. But sadly, that's where my praises end. Because this story has to follow the main events of the original, nothing ends up being shocking or scary. We all know that Jeff is going to kill his family. We all know that Randy is going to bully Jeff. But the story presents these events as if we have never heard them before. And that's the other thing about this story. It makes the stupid reality that these stories existed seem even dumber. So Randy, Keith, and Troy were all really one-note characters that only really existed to motivate and piss off Jeff. So obviously the correct move in a retelling of the story would either be to flesh them out more or to avoid them. But this story does neither somehow, and they are even more one note. In this story, they're just even more generic bad guys. I didn't even think that was possible. Like, how did you take these guys and make them even more generic? How? And something else that's stupid in the story is that everyone in this town knows who Jeff is and that he murdered his family. Okay, in the original story, it's never said that the police knew who he was. In fact, it was kind of implied that no one knew who he was. The story opens with a kid describing a scary murder man he saw, and then it explains who he is. No one in the paper says, yup, the famous Jeff the Killer. So, why do the townspeople know that Jeff killed his family? it makes everyone look really stupid. So presumably, the police know who did the crime and have known that Jeff cut his face due to the blood that would be in the sink where he cut his face. So how is Jeff still at large? And if the people in the town all know that Jeff killed his family and ran away and has probably cut himself, and the guy looks like this, how has no one caught him yet? And it's not like Jeff tries to hide his identity. Later on, Jane identifies him as Jeff, and instead of denying his identity, he responds with the one and only, which implies that not only does Jeff not care if his identity is found out, but people must recognize him a lot because he responded as if he gets that question a lot. So what the hell? Why haven't the police caught him yet? It's a really stupid inconsistency because all these stories make sure to tell you that the police are looking for this guy. But if everyone apparently knows his name and knows what he looks like, and the dude wears a bloody white hoodie, like, dude, are you gonna arrest him, or are you just gonna let more people die? What the hell? Not only that, but the story attempts to flesh out Jeff before he becomes a crazy murderer, but it doesn't really work. He's the quiet kid, and he and Jane have one conversation. And while I do like that this kind of foreshadowing that Jane isn't really all there, it's kind of, well, a missed opportunity in my opinion. Because Jane acts like they're close friends, but they're not. And again, I get it, Jane is crazy, but what if they were good friends? What if the story was, well, basically about someone realizing that their friend wasn't who they thought they were and comes to realize it too late? And I hear you typing, wait a minute, your suggestions for fixing Jane the Killer are the same as you suggested for Jeff the Killer. You hack. I am gonna dislike, uncomment, and unsubscribe. And you know what? That's a fair point. But I just think that that would have made the story more scary, and it's a horror story, so yeah, if the idea isn't broke, don't fix it, I guess. Also, because the original didn't do it, I kind of feel like now would be the perfect time to do it. I mean, it's kind of like this story wants to retcon certain things, like they're in high school now and not in middle school, but doesn't want to retcon too much. But why not? A lot of these stories end up contradicting each other, so why not just, I don't know, start it here? That'd be fun. Oh well. So, for whatever reason, Premiere Pro decided to delete the rest of the audio I recorded. So if this take sounds noticeably different from my sleep exhausted, tired self when I recorded it, then you're welcome. So anyway, Jane the Killer, the best story I've reviewed so far. I totally hope stories in the future don't reduce Jane to a pointless rival character, because that would be bad, and that would not be very fun to listen to. I mean read. I totally read all these stories and didn't listen to them. I'm a very valid reviewer of creepypastas. Everyone comes to me for my opinions. Alright, anyway, if you liked this video, be sure to unlike, don't comment, don't subscribe, throw this video into the garbage can as fast as you can.
Fast as I can? As fast as you can.
And if you didn't enjoy it, if you hated this video, like, comment, subscribe. Come on, tell me what you liked about it. Alright, next episode I'll be covering the sequel stories, the bad ones, because negative criticism is more fun to write than positive, engaging criticism. And whenever I try to record myself saying, you know, being happy, no one likes it because the YouTube algorithm is made by a bunch of narcissistic, pissed off robots who love it when people are angry at each other. So of course, whenever there's a review of something that's negative, it goes higher up. Why do you think the Angry Video Game Nerd got so popular? I have to do the same thing. I'm not allowed to be positive. You hear me? This isn't a choice. I am forced to do this.
God told me to do this. Please, help me.